All right, so I'm actually filming this at the end, but I'm gonna put it in at the beginning because before you start flattening things on the bottom of your boat and block sanding everything, it's very important before you go too crazy to get an idea of how the boat came. And so you wanna check all of your angles. You wanna check here, for example, this is called a dihedral, how the sponsons are actually angled, right? They're not flat. So the last thing you want to do is take a block sander and start sanding it like this and flattening everything out when the boat was clearly designed to have some angles, some dead rise, dihedral, whatever you want to call it, in the steps, you know? So check everything out. It's obviously you can modify things, you can flatten things, you can true things up. But I should add, the reason we blueprint is because none of these boats are perfect. These boats come from a mold, and just like on a full-size race boat, nothing is perfect. And so even the best boats out there, even though it's expensive hulls, MHZ, whatever it is, they all need some work because none of them come out of a mold perfect. And so we blueprint for more speed, and more importantly than the mile an hour that we pick up, we're blueprinting for predictability of a boat. So just like on a car, how you wouldn't want to put some cheap Chinese tires if it's a performance car, right? You'd want good rubber, good Michelins. The bottom of our boats is the only thing contacting the water. And so the more true, the more square everything is, the more predictable and reliable, but mostly predictable, the boat will be when you're tuning it, when you're trying to get more speed out of it. You don't want any funky things happening with a small boat going 70 plus. So now we'll roll into the actual phase one of the blueprint. Hey, what's going on, guys? So as you could probably see in the last video, this boat has kind of a unique bottom where it'll rock, and it's not something I've really seen before on a cat, but basically the steps aren't all even. So I wanted to show you guys some cool blueprinting tools, and also wanted to show you guys that it doesn't always have to be a full blueprint. Like as you can see on this boat, it's really just a little bit of block sanding is all I've really done to it. And obviously I've got low spots, and a full blueprint you would go through and fill those in and get the boat to sit really well on a nice flat countertop. But I wanted to show you guys, so I was talking about this MDF board, and this stuff actually makes really good sanding blocks. So I got different lengths, and again, I got most of these from building the Pearl. But essentially what you're going to need to make this work is some adhesive backed sandpaper. So you can use the sandpaper, you can cut pieces, you can get it in different grits, and you can basically make a sanding block out of basically anything. So I've got a finer grit on this side. And so these long sanding blocks will really come in handy because as you're trying to square up the bottom of your hull, you can imagine having something a little longer. You know, you're able to do nice long strokes and make sure that you're getting everything nice and true. So another thing that you're definitely going to want is a nice long straight edge so that you can check your work, double checking everything. And yeah, I think the biggest thing is just don't be afraid to sand the bottom of your boat. I know it doesn't look quite as pretty, but the reality is, you know, the fastest race boats out there don't usually have nice painted bottoms. You know, everything needs a blueprint. When these things come out of the mold, they are not perfect. And so I'm still trying to decide how far I want to take this blueprint, but I think I'm going to start with some block sanding, try and sand a little bit further into it. You can actually really feel these low spots. But the nice thing about this layup is it's super thick, and it's also got an inlay. And so what that means is I can actually remove a lot more material than if it were like a really thin carbon fiber boat. And so, yeah, nice straight sanding blocks, adhesive back sandpaper. Check your work on the counter, check your work with the long straight edge. And we're gonna do a very mild block sand, essentially is all it's gonna be. And I'm not even gonna bother filling it in. I'm just gonna keep sanding it, kind of seeing how it goes. It's a unique bottom. And usually when you see a boat that has a lot of rock, a lot of twist in it, usually it's not intentional. Usually it's because they pull them from the mold too quick, and in the manufacturing process they get a little bit warped, twisted. This boat, actually, part of this is the design of it. It's why it runs very unique. It's why it will kind of hook turn sometimes, and you know, it's also fun. It's a fun boat, so it's a little different design. So I don't want to go too crazy with it just yet. I want to try and maximize the design that it came with. But, you know, by setting a straight edge on the steps, you can see, for example, here, that the back of the step is not touching, but the middle of it is. And so that is a problem, and that is what we're going to kind of take out with some of the block sanding. So I'll update you guys after a little bit of sanding. So this is all the sanding I'm really going to do to it at the moment. And you don't want to go crazy with the long block because you don't really want to change the angle of attack that's kind of built into the boat, right? Like obviously each one of these steps has its own angle. You're not trying to have the bottom perfectly flat, but just enough to take off a little bit here. You can see I took off quite a bit here, a little bit at the trailing edges, a little bit. These dark spots are obviously our low spots. You can actually feel how low they are. And you don't really want to go, like if you go through the gel coat, that's fine. If you even get to the fiberglass, that's fine. But you don't really want to go past that. If you start to see fiberglass, you kind of want to stop there. And then from there, you would use a filler to fill in the low spots, you know. But even something like this, as ugly as it might be, is still going to run a lot better than just a flat, shiny wavy bottom. So again, I'm not really trying to change the character of this boat. I'm not trying to turn it into like an Avenger or a Cheetah, which should be perfectly square. I'm trying to keep the character of the boat, but just maybe refine what the factory was trying to do. And so one thing I could do, for example, right, because I have about an 1/8 inch gap in the back, is I could easily take some, this is about 1 millimeter thick. This is 1 millimeter thick G10. And so I could easily cut strips of this, right, and end up epoxying them onto the back. And that would get rid of the rock entirely. It would turn it into an Avenger, an Aeromarine Avenger, right, a 36-inch hull. So I'm kind of trying to find the balance on this boat between being a bit unique and a bit quirky like it is, but just truing everything up. I'm trying to keep the essence of the boat the same, basically, if that makes sense. But if you do have gaps and you are doing a blueprint, you can get 1 millimeter. They also have a 1.5 millimeter G10. And essentially you would do a sanding like this and use epoxy to put the G10 on the ride pad, and you could take out that gap. But again, it's a little more complicated. You don't really want to be changing the actual angles of attack on the sponsons. And so that's why for this boat in particular, I'm just going to kind of go in steps because I'm already pretty happy with how it runs. I'm not trying to change it or turn it into something else. But yeah, so this is really all I'm going to do for it today. Just a basic block sanding. I might even do the front ones a bit too, just because I feel like this boat does ride on the front steps. So I might do just a very light block sand on those. But this is kind of just an intro to not even a blueprint, but just to kind of truing up your ride pads. And as you sand it, you'll start to see these low spots. You know, I can feel them. And with some filler, obviously you would need to sand. You know, you don't want to put filler on paint. You know, you would want to sand these low spots by hand and then fill them in. And just, you know, this took maybe 5 minutes and just something I can do to kind of true it up. And again, make sure you're going back to the counter and continually checking, because you don't want to be creating more work for yourself by over sanding anything. But yeah, we're gonna see how that runs. I'm gonna move the struts down just a hair, because last time out, that's kind of what it needed. A little bit more nose control, and hopefully get this boat out tomorrow. So probably see you guys at the lake.